Hi, my name is Jennifer Church. I'm a teacher here in the state of Oklahoma. I spent 3 years teaching 5th grade reading, and I just completed, or I'm in the process of completing, my 3rd year of 1st grade teaching. The topic of the video tonight is on verbal reasoning. Verbal reasoning is part of language comprehension and reading comprehension. Right now in academics, one of the primary models that people are looking at as being associated with the science of reading is a model published by Hollis Scarborough in 2001. And this is called Scarborough's Reading Rope. So the Scarborough's Reading Rope has 2 primary strands. We have a language comprehension strand and we have a word recognition strand. And those 2 strands are woven together to achieve skilled reading for our students. Now, each of the primary strands have finer strands running through them. So on the word recognition strand has 3 finer strands woven through that. Those 3 strands would be your phonological awareness, your decoding and spelling skills, and sight recognition. On the other strand, the language comprehension strand, there are actually 5 finer threads running through that. We have background knowledge, vocabulary knowledge, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. And we're going to work on that number 4, the verbal reasoning. So I want to share with you tonight some strategies that I have learned from La Brea Education and Corwin Connect. But first I want to share with you a definition of verbal reasoning that I found on Reading Rockets. Now I actually found a definition for this on all 3 websites, but I thought the one given by Reading Rockets was really the simplest. Kind of the most to the point. And what they said, and this is a direct quote from the Reading Rockets article, they said, verbal reasoning is the way we think with and about words. Now, this is from the Reading Rockets article, Comprehension in Depth, and that is part of their Reading 101 learning modules. And you can find that there on their website. So now I want to share with you from La Brea Education. There was an online blog or article called Wait, What is Verbal Reasoning? This was published June 18th, 2025 by La Brea Education. There were 2 principles they shared that I thought were really good. And again, a direct quote, it said, and they're talking about verbal reasoning, is they said it needs to be embedded across your instruction. And that's a direct quote from La Brea. The other big hit word right now in academics and reading is explicit or explicit and systematic. So one of the other words that La Brea uses is that they said really that teaching verbal reasoning needs to be explicit. You got to give explicit instruction in that. So one of the ways they give you as a strategy that could be used in an explicit instruction manner would be to model the thinking process. So there's 3 steps to modeling that thinking process linked with verbal reasoning. So 1, what do I know from the text? 2, what do I already know about the topic? And 3, how can you take those 2 things and put them together to understand what the author is saying? So I have a couple of books here tonight that I want to use as mentor text to kind of model these strategies. This is Naya's Long Walk to Water. It was written by Linda Sue Park and illustrated by Brian Pinkney. Naya's Long Walk, A Step at a Time, is actually the picture book companion to A Long Walk to Water. I'm going to read a little bit of the text and I'm going to stop partway through so we can use this strategy. Come on, Naya said. Why are you slow today? I'm tired, Akira said. Naya sighed. It was a long way to the water hole. I'll tell Mama that you were trouble, she said. Don't, Akira begged. I'll be good. She started walking a little faster. Akira, look. Naya pointed to the horizon where she could see a cloud of dust. What is it? I can't see, Akira whined. Antelope or a truck? Too far away to tell. Probably antelope. Trucks were a rare sight in their village. Akira was slowing down again. Naya said, You know the clapping game? Let's sing the song. And do the clapping too? Not while we walk, but later, okay? At the water hole, they took long drinks. Naya filled the jerry can. Then they played the clapping game twice. Time to go, Naya said. Akir dragged her feet. She walked more and more slowly. Soon she began to cry and sat down on the ground. I can't walk anymore, she said. It's too far, and I'm too tired. Don't be silly, Naya snapped. You've walked this before, lots of times. Akir cried and snuffled and hiccuped. She looked up at Naya, her eyes very big. Naya frowned. Akir was not a crybaby. Usually she skipped along, chattering like a starling. Naya knelt in front of Akir and felt her face. Akir's forehead and cheeks were burning hot. She had stopped crying and was quiet and still. Akir was sick, maybe very sick. Naya felt worry swelling inside her. They were at least half a morning's walk away from home. I must run and get help, she thought. She took a few steps, then glanced back at Akir. No, she could not leave Akir alone. Should they stay and wait for help? It might be hours before someone came. Akir would get sicker and sicker. I will have to carry her, and the water too. Her mother would need the water to help make Akir better. Naya opened the jerry can and poured out half the water. Now I would stop there, and I could model this thinking process, and I could say, I wonder why she just poured out half the drinking water. I know that the reason they walked all the way there was to get the water. So why would she pour it out? And they just said that her mother would need the water to make her sister better. So why would she pour it out? So I can model the thinking process, and I can say, what do I know from the text? I know her sister is sick. I know she said, I'm gonna have to carry her. And the water too. It says, I will have to carry her and the water too. Now, how can I take these two things? Because what do I already know about the topic? I know that a can of water is going to be heavy. If I have a gallon of milk in my fridge and lift it, it's heavy. If I take a big water cooler, if you've ever been to a picnic or a basketball game or outside playing, and you've got one of those great big orange water coolers, it is super duper heavy. And I know little children can be heavy too. So she's trying to carry her little sister and this water. And also, she might be a little girl herself. So for a child or even a teenager to carry a child and water at the same time would be really difficult. So I think that the reason that she is pouring out the water is so she could make the weight less. So it's not as heavy. So she can carry both her sister and the water. It's a sad thing that she had to give up the water, but I know that if you had to choose between your sister being sick and saving her and the water, you're going to choose your sister. But she kept part of the water so that her mom could help her to be better. Now, I can actually go to another strategy. So La Brea Education also suggests another strategy, and they simply say that you're going to ask the student, why do you think that? So maybe instead of modeling the thinking, I could just give my students an opportunity to respond. I might get to this page and I might say, I will have to carry her and the water too. Her mother would need the water to help make Akir better. Naya opened the jerry can and poured out half the water. And now I'm just going to stop here and I'm going to ask the students, and I'm going to let them give me feedback. And I'm going to say, why do you think she poured out half the water? And I'm going to let them give a response. But then I'm going to use this phrase, why do you think that? Now, again, I want to give you a direct quote from La Brea Education because I really like the way they phrase this. Here's what they say you need to do. They say, push students to explain their thinking, not just give the right answer. Because this is what we want to do with verbal reasoning, is we want them to give a chance to work on their thinking. We're modeling it for them, but we're also trying to give them opportunities to use that thinking. So those are two strategies from La Brea Education that we can use to help students. Now, a third strategy from La Brea Education would also be to just ask those open-ended questions. 3 examples that La Brea Education gave for good open-ended prompts would be, what might happen next? Why do you think the author included that detail? And what clues help you figure that out? I also want to switch over to Corwin Connect. There's something really great that I learned from Corwin Connect. We talk about kind of forward strategies and backward strategies. So they actually differentiated that there's like some forward inferencing and then there's like backward inferencing. And here's how they sort of distinguish between the two. They said forward inferencing is when you're kind of, it's almost like a prediction, but you're using inferences to kind of think what's going to happen next in the story. That's going to be like a forward thinking. And then you have really backward inferencing. So backward inferencing, as you get to later portions of the text, you're going to reflect back. So you get to a portion of the text and you might stop and you're going to connect it back to something you've already learned in the text. So I want to use this text a little bit more and see if we can use the Corwin Connect strategy of giving students opportunities to use some backwards inferencing. So the scenario we just showed would have been the forward inferencing. And I might be able to say to students, okay, what do you think is going to happen next? Or I could continue reading and we could work on some backward inferencing. So she says, still too heavy. And she poured out a little more. Akir was heavy. The water was heavy. Naya could take only a few steps before she had to rest. Home was so far away. Tears filled Naya's eyes. I can't do it. It's too far. I'm going to fast forward. I don't want to read the whole book, but I want to get to a later part of the story so I can kind of illustrate this backward reasoning for you, or the backward inferencing. So she eventually makes it back home to the village and gets her little sister to her mother. So once she arrives at the village, delivers her sister to her mother, it says, Naya sat down on the ground. She slumped for a long time with her head in her hands until she heard footsteps coming toward her. And I could stop here and I could ask, why do you think that Naya is sitting down on the ground? But I feel like I could use some of this backward inferencing and I could kind of ask them, what do we know about the story? What details do we have that helps us to understand? I think she's tired. And maybe the reason she's tired is because we learned in the story that she had to carry both her sister in the water and she had to walk for a very long period of time. So this would be part of our backward inferencing. I have another cute story here. This is called Turkey Trouble. And another way we could use our strategies from La Brea and from Corwin Connect is to look here at our story of Turkey Trouble. Again, we could use some of that forward inferencing, but I could read the title, Turkey Trouble, and show our turkey on the front. And I would actually just stop here at this first page because the first line of text says, Turkey was in trouble. Now, I could use here some of the open-ended prompts. I could say, what do you think is going to happen next? I could ask them to make a prediction. What do you think is going to happen? But if we fast forward through this text, we kind of get to the end. As we go through the story, we find out the turkey dresses up like all sorts of different animals to kind of hide from the farmer and his wife. But we get to the end and he comes up with a different strategy. It says he's worried he's going to be caught, and all of a sudden he comes up with a strategy. He's looking in the garden and he sees all these tomatoes, onions, mushrooms, peppers. He sees signs for all these things. So he changes his mind. And instead of dressing up like an animal, he dresses up as a pizza delivery guy and he delivers a pizza to the front door. His costume wasn't bad. In fact, it was turkey's best yet. Ding dong, happy Thanksgiving. And I would use the backward inferencing and I would ask my students, why do you think he chose that strategy? Why do you think he chose to deliver a pizza instead of dressing up as one of the animals? I could use the La Brea strategies. I could ask them, why do you think that? I could ask them, use the information in the story. He was going to dress up in a costume like one of the animals, why was this strategy better than that strategy? I hope that you enjoy some of these strategies from La Brea Education and Corwin Connect. I want to share with you some of the references I used tonight. I have 5 references really. There was one, A Neglected Strand of the Reading Rope is Verbal Reasoning. That was published by Corwin Connect. It was written by Douglas Fisher, Nancy Frey, and Diane Lapp. It was published September 26th of 2022, and that is on the Corwin website. La Brea Education Incorporated, there's an article, Wait, What is Verbal Reasoning by La Brea Education. That was published June 18th of 2025 and is also a blog on their website. And then we have Comprehension in Depth. That is on the Reading Rockets site, Reading Rockets, Launching Young Readers. And that was part of their Reading 101 Learning Modules section. And Reading Rockets is sponsored by WIDA. And then 2 of the books we had was Naya's Long Walk, A Step at a Time. That's by Clarion Books, by Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, by Linda Park, and illustrated by Jerry Pinkney. And then Turkey Trouble, written by Wendy Silvano and illustrated by Lee Harper. Thank you for watching my video. I hope that you can use these strategies at home with your child or in your classroom. Thank you and have a beautiful summer.